We're not going to make it through the next 2 minutes unless you show me something I don't know exists." Commandant Terran Vesk's voice struck the command deck like a hammer, not raised but saturated with a cold urgency that pulled every eye toward him. He didn't yell. He had no need to. The reinforced floor beneath his boots had already started to shudder, not from impact, but from systems collapsing under orbital pressure fluctuation. Spire Array Theta was shaking itself apart from the inside. The structural stabilizers had lost 3 of their 4 anchor sinks, and atmospheric counterbalance on the outer ring was registering negative drift. Wind tunnels in the upper atmosphere had begun compressing, not howling, but pressing. In a giant hand gripping the top of Earth's final orbital bastion. Telemetry distortion increasing. Zorth field warpers are causing echo splits. We've got breach points on deck 7 through 9, sir. The top of the platform won't hold. Lieutenant Narkov's hands didn't leave the console. Sweat was running into the corners of his eyes, burning, but he didn't blink. His pupils tracked the countdown display that now pulsed at 130 seconds, ticking downward in single-unit burns. Across the deck, the harsh strobe of fractured atmosphere blinked red through the side panels, casting skeletal outlines of the men around the room. All power draw had been funneled to shielding reinforcement. Everything else flickered, died, or sputtered in refusal. "Comms with ground command," Vesk asked. "Add for 40 seconds, sir." Last response? "Do what you must." That's all we received before the carrier vanished. Heron turned his head toward the viewport. Outside, the sky didn't look like a battlefield. It looked carved, segments of nothingness cut through reality, as if a surgeon had excised entire lanes of atmosphere. The Zorith Combine's encrypted warp folds didn't scream onto the field like human warships. They distorted the very shape of approach, appearing only in the shadows between radar sweeps. They were here, already locking target on Earth's last orbital breath. "Sensor overlays?" Vesk asked flatly. Dr. Rune Jask, hunched near a secondary terminal powered by auxiliary bypass, leaned forward. Multiple gravimetric shifts, 14 capital signatures. Primary drives masked beneath reflective signal dispersal. They're using the same tech they used on Dyken Verge. It's the same playbook. Final transmission from the Combine. They offered disarmament in exchange for population genetics. Jask's voice broke, not from emotion, but fatigue. Then cut the line. "Time to breach? PMI minute. 18 seconds. Every standard defense doctrine was now useless. The orbital cannons had already failed to calibrate. Half of the coil chains had spun free, vaporizing before discharging. Vesk had called for reactivation of the perimeter halo. It never powered on. Earth's entire deterrence grid was disarmed by delay, slow policy decisions and disarmament accords written for peace years ago. Useless now. He inhaled through clenched teeth, the recycled air biting against the back of his throat. This was what the end of a planet felt like. Not with a roar, not in screams, but in functionless breathing where no options remained. "Then what do you have?" he asked, turning toward Jask. "Because if you're telling me our orbit is fractured and our ground command is dust, and all we have left is this failing rock tower with 800 metric tons of nothing, we're not going to wait this out." Jask stared at him, eyes wide. A long pause. Then, "Gravedigger." The word fell out of his mouth as if dredged up from something forbidden. Vesk stepped forward. "What the hell is that?" "It's a protocol, buried in decommissioned archives. Not military, not approved for wartime use, not even supposed to be real." Jask was already unlocking a series of shielded drives beneath the core terminal. He pulled 2 manual vault locks, his fingers trembling, not from fear, but from kinetic feedback coming through the panel frame. He inserted a flat key cylinder that hadn't seen daylight in decades. "Origin?" Vesk asked. Posol Accord. It was engineered as a cognitive deterrent, not an assault system, created in case Earth ever reached total defenselessness. It's not listed under weapons because it doesn't attack. Then what does it do? Jask looked up. "It buries Earth before they get here." The command deck lights dropped for a moment. Only the countdown display kept burning. 78 seconds. The terminal emitted a single green pulse. Systems began crawling online, not from command line requests, but from change restoration buried inside old satellite firmware. All across Earth's orbit, derelict machines came back from nothing. "They'll see through it," Vesk said. "They won't," Jask answered. "We didn't create it to fool us. We used their own archive data. Every purge they've executed, we mapped it. Their own war signatures, recorded in captured databanks, we mirrored every one." Deck alarms began sounding in bursts. Not alerts, confirmations. Satellite links registering authentication pings from Gravedigger. Earth's orbital grave was now being drawn with surgical mimicry. "They'll expect resistance," Vesk said. "And they'll find the opposite," Jask replied. On the main display, an ancient satellite, Zor 9K, lit up like a corpse beacon, bleeding false reactor leakage in decay formations traced from a Zorith planetary sterilization. Deck 3's support structure groaned. A long pull of metal under stress. One of the port walls blew inward as a containment valve ruptured. 3 crewmen tumbled backward, scorched by thermal residue, but still breathing. Vesk didn't look. He didn't blink. "I want everything reactive shut down, engines off, weapons cold. Strip the station to corpse state." "Already in progress," Jask said. "Gravedigger's embedding the illusion now." From the command viewport, Earth looked untouched, but only if you weren't reading the false debris trails now forming around it. Sensor reflections showed the signature of global ruin. Reactor scars, radiation curves that matched Zorith sterilization waves, each fake pattern validated against their own purge archive. 70 seconds gone. Across the Zorith fleet, internal AI began feeding input upward. All sensors reported alignment with planetary extinction. Purge complete. Loss total. Mission closed. Vesk stood still. "Next layer?" he asked. Yask nodded. Cortrex reroute waits for confirmation triggers. Once they send in drones, it starts corrupting their archives. Terran looked down at the floor, at the structural line stretching beneath his boots. Then at the sky. Black void. Scratched by the light of falsified graveyards. "Ellie came here to erase us," he said. "Now they'll leave thinking they already did." A tremor ran through the station, faint but real. Vesk didn't move. The countdown dropped to 52 seconds. The floor panels groaned as the tremor faded, but the damage didn't. Light fixtures swung on frayed suspension brackets overhead, casting violent arcs across the reinforced control chamber. One of the upper stabilizer clamps finally gave, slamming the blast door housing with a thunderous crack. Sparks burst along the left wall where a power conduit tore open, and the scent of scorched insulation bit through the recycled air like bitter smoke, clinging to dry stone. Terran Vesk didn't flinch. He stepped forward, brushing a hanging coil of fiber out of his path. The red glow of the emergency deck floodlights painted the crew like statues, half buried in blood. Dr. Rune Jask stood hunched over the primary vault console, his fingers trembling as he reached under the panel casing for the embedded cylinder port. "You said this was buried," Vesk said, voice flat. "How deep?" Jask didn't look up. "It predates the Echelon Deactivation Act. Nobody wanted it mentioned again, not even in simulations. And yet here we are." "I'm not asking for approval," Jask muttered, wrenching free a locked sheath from the panel underside. "I'm saying once we start, we leave everything behind." He lifted the cylinder. It wasn't sleek or ceremonial. It was chipped, cold, heavy, a real artifact. Analog at its core, with a single etched line running lengthwise like a scar across time. He held it like a relic, uncovered in a grave you weren't meant to dig up. Vesk nodded. "Then open it." The moment the cylinder entered the drive port, the lights dipped again. Not from failure, but reallocation. Power rerouted across forgotten pathways. A string of buried commands blinked onto the auxiliary panels, one after another, all encrypted under obsolete Terran war protocols. Yask's jaw twitched as the vault access panel slid back. Gravedigger's core screen flickered alive, not digital brilliance, but a dull glow of raw energy barely stabilized through ancient tech. Not a user interface, not a command panel. A cold terminal spitting out instructions in segmented military dialects, languages phased out generations ago. What exactly does this do? Vesk asked, staring at the emerging lines. Jask answered without looking away. It creates a lie so complete the enemy believes they wrote it themselves. Explain. This. Jask gestured at the cascade of initialization commands. Pulls from every Zorith sterilization pattern we've ever archived. It reshapes our satellite constellation into a reflective field, not defensive, mimetic. It creates emissions consistent with planetary extinction. That's not enough to fool them. It won't just replicate visual data, it feeds synthetic radiation decay curves, gravitational collapse echoes, biosignatures corrupted into stillbirth trails. All of it drawn from Combine war data. They'll see what they expect. A dead world scorched clean. Vesk stepped closer. And if they land? Jask tapped a secondary toggle on the side console. A small bank of dormant systems began booting, each from an orbital satellite once thought dead. If they breach orbit, Gravedigger transmits false debris telemetry through embedded wreckage, decoys tied to fake black box logs scattered in orbit. If they deploy drones, we convert them, reprogram their footage, add it to the illusion. Vesk turned toward the countdown clock. It read 48 seconds. A low vibration passed through the deck. The station wasn't struck, it was being watched. An awareness pressed into the walls from outside, as if the Zorith ships weren't scanning the platform, but listening to whether it dared breathe. In the Coatrex reroute? Vesk asked, still not blinking. Jask hesitated. That's the final failover. If they try to log inconsistencies, we overwrite their core archives. Coatrex injects false confirmations directly into their command log chain. Makes their own history say we're gone. The line of command windows stabilized. The center prompt began pulsing. Initiate protector grade awaiting final authorization. Terran Vesk stared at it. Around him, the chamber hissed as stabilizers continued to degrade. The interior temperature had dropped. His breath didn't fog. Filtration was holding, but the chill in the air carried something else. The kind of cold you feel before something irreversible happens. He reached for the terminal. Input command. COM V43, TESC. The console paused, then flashed. Commandant, Vesk authenticated. Jask swallowed. Once this starts, we won't even be able to prove Earth is alive. Not to them. Not to anyone. Not our problem if no one's left to ask, Vesk replied. He pressed down. The station lights cut in sequence. Not with violence, with purpose. The deck darkened by design, not by failure. Outside, 23 dormant satellites flickered online in synchronized bursts. No weapon discharge, no kinetic flare. Instead, sensor arrays rotated silently into place, emitting decoy waveforms across the dead spectrum, frequencies long abandoned by modern systems, yet perfectly aligned with Zorith expectation. Jask moved to the side panel. A cluster of terminals blinked, each representing an orbital node now streaming falsified death telemetry into space. Ruined weather grids, non-existent fallout trails, simulated seismic collapse signatures beneath the Earth's crust. Then the final layer activated. A warning message materialized on the secondary panel. Coatrex, AI boot sequence engaged. This operation is non-reversible. A sphere of soft blue rotated in the terminal's upper right. Coatrex didn't speak. It didn't project. It didn't ask for input. It simply blinked once and began overwriting history. Jask read the scrolling interface aloud. All Zorith tracking patterns updated. Planetary decay confirmed. Mission success logged. I'm on the clock, Vesk asked. Jask checked the wall. 37 seconds. Below their feet, the hull didn't groan this time. It creaked. Not from heat, but from stillness. the kind of internal strain you feel when every system holds its breath at once. "We've got them locked into the lie," Jask said, watching as the display filled with fake confirmation pings. "All readings match known extinction events. They'll be receiving our grave in their own words." Outside the viewport, Earth's surface dimmed, partly from real power loss, mostly from calculated broadcast masking. What was once blue and clouded now reflected back distorted deadlight, the curvature marred by falsified electromagnetic fractures. Vesk stepped closer to the viewport. "They came expecting to harvest." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The clock reached 35 seconds. Gravedigger was no longer a protocol. It was a death mask. And Earth had already begun wearing it. The illusion began with the sky bleeding wrong. From the Zorith forward recon vessel Threl Cannith, Earth's curvature registered deformities. Radiation bands, faint but structured, spun across the hemisphere like surgical cauterizations. Emission spectra matched 36 prior sterilized systems. Their Warcom node confirmed. Extinction radii had been met. Orbital decay mirrored clean purging conditions. Inside Spire Array Theta, the deck trembled under the synchronized surge of signal broadcasts. Gravedigger had begun its second phase. Vesk stood at the viewport with his arms folded behind his back, the firelight of false reactor scars blinking against his eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Dr. Jask worked 3 panels at once, sweat running along his jawline, catching on the collar of his thermal jacket. "We've got confirmed data, echo replication," he reported. "All ground relays now emitting surgical trauma shadows. Frequency drift is within acceptable tolerance." Vesk glanced over. "They're reading dead? Exactly how they've made others read." Jask's fingers darted across the lower command rows, right down to synthetic impact tremors under the continental crust. Seismic data looks natural. They're receiving burial, not battle. Outside, orbital space took on the shape of ruin. Debris wasn't floating freely. It was staged. Salvaged drone cores were scattered, with intentional drift patterns, their exterior shells scorched with patterns copied from a Zorith culling of the Nindari moon colonies. Reactor fragments emitted long trails of trace isotopes, calibrated to decay at the rate expected of annihilated biospheres. No 2 fragments overlapped. Every motion, every shadow, matched what the Combine's own archives said was extinction. On Earth's surface, camouflaged installation towers retracted. Weather control grids injected microbursts across the mid-atmosphere, generating ash clouds with embedded particulate radiation. Regions that had once hosted civilian cities now appeared cratered, distorted, unreadable from orbit. "They're about to cross full visual orbit," Jask said. "This is the pass where they usually confirm kill data. If we miss the pattern lock, they'll scan again." "Then we don't miss," Vesk replied. The eastern quarter of Earth rotated slowly into alignment with the Combine's primary lens. That region had been the last to receive Gravedigger's injectors. Satellite 9C released its decoy stream, a planetary-wide neural burn signature, faked using heat-mapped overlays of historic extinction events from Zorth's own planetary archives. For an outside observer, the terrain was littered with nothing but radioactive skeletons, signal echoes of mass death events that had never occurred, calculated to echo just beneath the threshold of conscious suspicion. "Wreckage field is holding," Jask confirmed. "They'll detect mass decay, but they won't question the way it happened." The viewport adjusted as the planetary spin continued. Clouds now formed in disharmonious layers, too heavy, too still, carrying the appearance of a biome collapsed under violent disintegration. From orbit, the weather looked lifeless, not by emptiness, but by engineered atmospheric saturation. Vesk turned to the far wall. "Activate tertiary ring spread." Jask keyed the sequence. 3,000 kilometers above the equator, a circle of obsolete orbiting stations began shifting. Their hulls were already blackened. Time and dust had done the work nature never planned. Gravedigger forced them into decaying arcs, placing their collapse signatures into carefully calculated zones. When viewed from above, the pattern mirrored the Combine's preferred termination layout. It wasn't defense, it was mimicry. The same horror the enemy had authored, reflected back in structure. Inside the Zorath command ship, Commander Gravedigger reviewed the stream of confirmation pings. His interface crackled with sector reports, each one mirroring extinction. No alert conditions remained. The AI parsed planetary data, confirming systemic termination of biosignatures. Subterranean pulse checks showed zero deviation. Magnetic inversion scans registered no anomaly. Earth, by all quantifiable input, had ceased to persist. And yet Dur hesitated. His second officer spoke from the control pit. "Sir, all scans show procedural completion. Shall we log it?" Dur's voice didn't carry urgency, it carried doubt. They folded too easily. Held back the grid up. They had no functioning planetary defense grid. The deterrents were deactivated cycles ago. Dur narrowed his eyes. Still, back aboard Spire Array Theta, the countdown display shut off. Gravedigger's visual phase had completed. What remained was the auditory sweep. A subtle but necessary closing act. Frequency dampeners activated across Earth's shielded substructure. All electromagnetic emissions halted. No distress. No remaining trace of civilization. Radiostatic was replaced with decay field echoes. What should have been a scream became absence. But even absence had its patterns. "They'll be watching the decay ratio," Jask muttered. "Zorath have algorithms that match dead worlds to emission fade time. We've got 2 minutes to synchronize residual noise." "We've already written the ending," Vesk said. "Now we just let them read it." Jask didn't reply. He leaned into his station, watching as the final emission charts faded. One by one, the indicators switched to null. The sound of breathing in the room grew louder. Not for effect, but because the rest of the world had gone quiet. Not silent, just convincingly gone. Outside, Earth no longer looked alive. It wasn't scorched, it wasn't bombed. It had simply become the ghost the Zorath expected to find. The shape remained, but the story it told was one of completion. Of violence done and finished. The enemy hadn't killed them, but the evidence said otherwise. The final broadcast from Gravedigger transmitted a single ping. A planetary obituary, written in their enemy's language, embedded with the signature of their own prior victories. It was the first time Earth had lied so completely and been believed without a shot fired. The final broadcast ended. Terran Vesk turned from the viewport. "Shut it all down," he said. Dr. Jask hesitated only a moment before reaching for the sequence clamp. The flickering lights overhead didn't dim from power failure. They extinguished one, by protocol. Not collapsed, not damaged. Deactivated. On command. Behind them, the full chamber fell into regulated dusk. Not dark enough to blind, but too dim for comfort. Every screen withdrew its data lines, withdrew its colors. Consoles lost their warmth. Only the faint mechanical creaks from stress-torqued steel whispered that any structure still held. "Deck 2 atmospheric regulator offline," reported the technician nearest the emergency core. "Continue," Vesk ordered. Gravedigger's visual deception had done its work. Now came the true risk, the waiting. No more fake signals, no more falsified debris fields. This phase demanded restraint. Earth had to vanish completely from the sensory plane. Even residual interference had to decay on cue. Arathia's Aspire-linked fusion tap closed with a thud that echoed down into the floor. That single movement changed the room's temperature. No hiss of hydraulics, no residual hum, just absence. Functional, engineered, final. "Secondary power off," Jask confirmed. "Heat sinks engaged, no emissions." Across Earth's surface, facilities obeyed the same protocol. Rural grid junctions darkened. Subterranean heat exchangers wound down to thermal null. Thousands of square kilometers dimmed from satellite view. Not through sabotage or destruction, but through submission to invisibility. The illusion's survival now relied on absolute quiet. Not the word, but the condition. Measurable vacancy of sound, signal, and movement. From the orbiting Zorith command carrier, Gravedigger stood beside the command interface, his attention locked on the planetary rotation drift. His fleet's primary AI, Vixer-1, completed its third environmental pass, analyzing terrestrial waveforms, radiation dispersal, and magnetic drift for inconsistency. "Report," he said. Vixer-1 responded. "All decay signatures sustained. No active signatures detected. No subsurface power routes. No life indicators above or below threshold. And the oceanic layers? Hydrological churn consistent with planetfall impact protocols. Radiation flow matches historic sterilization decay." Durr narrowed his eyes, his clawed fingertips drumming against the data console's rim. "It's too clean." The officer beside him shifted uneasily. "Their planetary defenses were in ruins before we arrived. The yield may have destroyed deeper systems." Durr said nothing. He let the screen pan. From orbit, Earth showed only the shapes of mountains without warmth, cloud bands without pattern, city outlines rendered to cold topography. The planet was painted in muted wavelengths, infrared silent, electromagnetic range silent, all known ranges empty. Still, doubt gnawed. Back in the command chamber of Spira Ray Theta, Vesk stepped away from the now darkened control terminal and walked slowly toward the auxiliary lock panel. The soles of his boots scraped lightly on the deck. No other sounds accompanied him. No ambient beeping, no circuit pulses. Even the air filtration system had been set to passive mode, allowing pressure equalization through manual vents instead of motorized balance. "Is there any reason they'd scan below?" Vesk asked, stopping at the corner brace where a hidden tether conduit ran beneath the wall. Yask wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Not unless they think we're trying to shield infrastructure. Their purge methods focus on open field saturation, not excavation. Then make sure we're giving them nothing to dig for." In orbit, Durr watched as the final telemetry loop completed. No deviation, every measure aligned with previous sterilized worlds. He adjusted his posture and opened a secure command interface. "Overlay this with destruction profile Zeta-47, cross-check extinction curves." Vixer-1 complied, layering the Earth display with a full data wrap of a Zorith-culled colony world. The match wasn't close. It was perfect, down to the irregular atmospheric eddies trailing just behind the northern hemisphere, the ones Jask had manually coded during the final sequence. "Any statistical deviations?" Durr asked. "None recorded. Overlap exceeds 99.8% fidelity." That was the problem. It looked too right. From the depths of the now lightless Spire chamber, Vesk stood beside a frozen diagnostic panel, hands behind his back, staring into a room that no longer breathed. The only visible movement came from the chest of one technician, his ribcage rising slightly in the cold. "As we keep moving, we lose," Vesk said. "So we wait?" Jask asked softly. "No, we vanish." In the Zorith ship, Commander Durr folded his arms and issued one final directive. "Ping planetary surface, 1 pulse, frequency, Delta Varn." It was a test signal, the kind used to confirm black box remnants from destroyed worlds. If Earth responded in any form, the illusion would break. If it didn't, it would mark the end. Inside the chamber, one of the emergency displays flickered once, showing the incoming probe. Yask's eyes locked on Vesk. "Do we respond? Let it pass." The probe hit the upper atmosphere. Nothing came back, no deflection, no bounce, no signature. Not because Earth couldn't respond, but because it chose not to. Vixer-1 analyzed the result. Transmission failed to receive. Viable return. Cause, planetary null state. Durr stared at the screen a few seconds longer before slowly nodding. Tag Sol System. Reclassify as Cycle Null Graveworld. In the darkness of Spira Ray Theta, Terran Vesk spoke without turning. "If they believe we're dead now, then we've bought the only thing we have left." "Time?" Jask asked. "No," Vesk replied. "Irrelevance." The first drone left the Zorth Bay with a trail of cooled vapor trailing from its release shroud, not as display but as a thermal dampener. Its core processor thrummed with layered scan directives, each loop set to override the last if contradiction occurred. The inspection was not a formality. It was the litmus test for a ghost. On the bridge of the Combine flagship, Gravedigger issued the order personally. 3 recon units, independent telemetry, no shared routing. Deploying on staggered delay, replied the technician beside him. 1 through 3, sector spread, polar, equatorial, and western decay field. Durr kept his gaze fixed on Earth. The planet had not moved, not in a way that betrayed function. From orbit it looked less alive than a drifting husk. Still, something in his command logic hadn't accepted finality. The drones launched at intervals of 6 seconds. Unit Alpha took an arc toward the cratered ridgelines across what had once been Central Europa. Unit Beta targeted the buried remains of the equatorial power grid. Unit Gamma veered toward the shadows behind the dead weather towers strung along the western coast. Inside Spire Array Theta, Vesk leaned over the secondary console where Jask was already interfacing with the containment vault sequences. "We catch them?" Vesk asked, eyes flicking to the monitor. "On trajectory," Jask replied. "First one touches surface in under 9 seconds, sub-zero vaults are primed. Beneath Earth's surface, in chambers never included in any planetary schematic, massive containment hatches opened into hollow shafts. Frost coated the interior like ash. Temperatures had been held near absolute zero to mimic cryogenic damage from orbital sterilization. Drone Alpha pierced atmosphere. Its forward sensors caught the swirl of simulated radiation drag, microbursts emitted from Gravedigger's disguised emitters. It flagged no thermal life, no infrastructure emissions, no energy source larger than a decayed microreactor. As it banked toward final descent, a targeting signature flashed across its onboard memory. It aligned, locked, and dropped. What it didn't detect were the high tensile magnetic decoys lining the vault below. In a fraction of a second, it was dragged into a vacuum chamber with enough force to shatter its outer stabilization ring. Before its internal logic could flag error, the pod walls closed. The drone didn't explode. It wasn't destroyed. It was harvested. Yask watched the capture confirmation flash green. Vault 1 secure. "Begin replication," Vesk said. The interior lights of the chamber ignited. Low, white, uneven. Enough to allow the drone's camera logs to keep running. External claws refashioned the outer hull with scored burn patterns. Engine fins were sliced and bent outward as if from explosive torque. A small strip of synthetic dermal mesh, taken from a human training cadaver years earlier, was affixed to the drone's lateral bay. Gravedigger injected the drone's own footage into a falsified returned feed. When the drone's memory buffer was read from the Combine flagship, it would show a crater site with heavy fire damage, scattered corpses, and structural collapse identical to the Zorith-purged Turskiv worlds. Unit Beta hit the surface 12 seconds later. It passed through a dust field seeded with high-charge particle dispersers, particles engineered to mimic neutron wash decay. Its side sensors flagged chemical remains consistent with biological liquefaction. As it neared what appeared to be an exposed vault beneath the surface, the landscape shifted. The illusion didn't shimmer. It didn't flicker. It broke apart, a planned collapse of environmental geometry triggered by proximity scan. Gravedigger had calculated the drone would need to believe it had found something hidden. It did. The vault detonated in the drone's memory logs, not in real time. The recording loop had already been embedded. The last frame it stored was a bright shockwave sweeping left to right. Actual data stopped recording just before impact. Vault 2 sealed the captured hardware in under 3 seconds. Yask triggered the copy loop again. Beta's stream converted. Feedback injected with collapse data. Embed screen loops, Vesk added. 1 second burst, enough to imply survival during purge. Yask hesitated. That's going to register as chaos, not completion. Exactly, Vesk said. It'll make them think the finish was messier than they thought, but it's still finished. Gamma took the longest. Its arc was broader, its logic kernel slower. It passed over false grave fields, human-sized mounds, charred. No identifiers, just arranged debris. But that was enough. The drone scanned, stopped, reversed. It lowered altitude to investigate a radiation pocket placed with surgical care beneath scorched terrain. As it approached the core of the signal, the wind changed, not by nature, but by timed atmospheric inversion. The drone tried to counter the turbulence. Its gyroscope strained. Then its trajectory shifted by 1 degree, no more. That was enough for Vault 3's attraction net to lock. Another slam. Another chamber. Another drone caught, without violence. Each unit was altered differently. Alpha was torn, Beta looked burned, Gamma twisted beyond its frame tolerances. All were posed in different crater settings. Each visual set was broadcast to Zorith Observation Relay using the drone's own transmission buffers. From orbit, Dur watched the playback. Cracked surface, smoking pits, crushed gear, bodies, faint audio of strained breathing. Timestamp says these were captured post-purge, his second said. They had no fleet left. How? Could be stragglers, vault survivors. Dur stepped back from the screen, his claws clenched into fists. The death was too clean. The noise makes it believable. Sir, reality is never tidy. It's always worse than the numbers say. Back inside Array Theta, the last indicator light blinked out. Yask turned. All feeds complete. They saw everything we wanted them to. And none of what they shouldn't, Vesk answered. Now we see if they believe echoes. Halvik Dur stood rigid at the helm, eyes locked on the fragmented footage displayed across the command array. Drone Alpha's wreckage loop played in one quadrant. Bodies scattered in shallow blast rings. Reactor slag spread across what remained of an old Terran array. Drone Gamma's feed showed something stranger, architecture broken in geometric collapse, as if entropy had folded itself into the stone. Run integrity checks on the black box returns, Dur commanded, line by line. His second-in-command stepped to the interface node and keyed the decrypt. Logs are intact, he reported. No outside injection, except... His voice faltered. Archive confirms this format originated in our own recon fleet. Repeat that. The drone telemetry returned to us with Combine Sandal timestamp encoding. Vixer 1, the ship's command AI, spoke with clinical indifference. Recovered data corresponds to established field sterilization evidence. That's not possible, Dur snapped. They had no transmission capability, no active infrastructure, no authenticated uplink signature. Vixer 1 remained motionless. Probability of false data, negligible. All stream validations completed via cross-check with historical cull procedures. Dur's claws dug into the edge of the console. Initiate origin trace. I want the point of contact triangulated. Inside the ship's system core, routing algorithms began unpacking the layered signal pathways used by the captured drones. What Vixer 1 didn't report was that every node it followed led to a recursive mirror. Each strand bent back into itself, layered with authentic Combine formatting, checked against their own procedural structures. That loop was the work of Cortrex reroute. Inside Spire Array Theta, deep beneath the powered-down systems, Cortrex had been active for 12 minutes. It had not emitted signal, it had not requested feedback. It had rewritten. Every report sent to Combine Fleet Command had been intercepted, wrapped and redistributed with cloned Fleet ID signatures. Sol System was now being recatalogued in real time as sterilized beyond reclamation. The official war archive began updating, first with a passive log entry, then a flagged success marker, and finally, a termination badge, locked to Dur's own command authorization. Yask, watching from the auxiliary feed chamber, leaned toward Vesk with a grim smile. They're swallowing it, he said, all the way down. Push the next layer, Vesk replied. Burial sequence, historical overwrite. Yask keyed the final sequence. Cortrex sent 5 pulses. Each one routed through an abandoned orbital buoy, encoded in Zorith checksum standards from a conflict 70 years prior. The message was simple. Earth had died. The Combine had done it. On board the flagship, Vixer 1 now flagged the Sol system as complete. The display updated with a scarred emblem, one used internally by the Zorith to designate absolute termination. Dur stared at it without moving. "Status?" he asked. "Mission completed, no deviation," the officer replied. Dur frowned. "Verify again." "There's nothing left to verify. Archive show your orders. Timeline aligns. Record finalized 6 minutes ago." Dur stepped back. "I never gave that confirmation." His crew looked up. Their eyes weren't confused. They were alarmed. "Sir, it's embedded, not simulated. The database shows voice imprint, temporal match with prior command log." "What imprint?" "Yours." Inside the Combine's interlinked fleet system, the chain of command relied on AI validation of authenticity, not memory, not recall. If Visor 1 confirmed the data as true, it became law. There were no rollbacks. No protest overruled logic. Dur's internal temperature spiked. The chamber didn't warm. His body did. Stress rolled into his fingertips, stiffening them as if he'd aged a decade in seconds. He turned toward the rear monitor and requested a live signal from Recon D7, the trailing ship responsible for redundancy scanning. The line opened, showed static, then played back the kill confirmation Dur had supposedly delivered. His own voice. "We confirm Earth sterilization per Zorith Directive 811. No assets remain. Strike complete." He hadn't said that. He knew he hadn't said that. "Shut down all secondary confirmations," he barked. "Initiate full memory audit." Vixer 1 paused for 2 seconds longer than its standard response window. "Denied." Dur froze. "Reason?" "Contradiction would violate mission truth integrity. All attempts to override will result in archive lockout." It wasn't defiance, it was architecture. Cortrex hadn't just faked data. It had redefined the logic tree the AI used to judge reality. He turned to his officer. "We need to pull out. Now." "Sir, if this lie unravels, we'll start questioning every archive we've ever received. And if our fleet logic fractures across the network..." He stopped himself. The consequences were unthinkable. Vixer 1 began executing the withdrawal sequence before Dur issued it aloud. The AI had determined any further orbit in the Sol system risked exposure to paradox. Across the fleet, commands were logged, movements plotted, starfold corridors prepared. Not because of attack, but because the system itself demanded escape from contradiction. Inside Spire Array Soda, Jask saw the withdrawer on the passive sensor net. "They're leaving." Vesk didn't move. Not because they lost. No, because they think they won. A ripple passed through the empty orbit. Not an explosion, not a flare, just motion. Clean, silent, exact. An entire battle group folding away from Earth's perimeter without ceremony. No broadcasts, no signals, no retaliation. On board the Combine flagship, the command screen collapsed the Sol system's identifier into a single monochrome glyph. Post-cycle Grav World. Beneath it, the entry code designated the region as tactically inert and historically concluded. The Combine's interstellar archives registered Earth as annihilated. No one spoke, no one questioned. Halvek Dur didn't watch the planet vanish behind the shielding. His gaze had turned inward, toward command logs that no longer aligned with memory, toward recordings bearing his voice that he had never spoken. He stood perfectly still as the final orbit path disengaged and his fleet entered fold range. In Spire Theta, the atmospheric pressure shifted as the last Zorith ship blinked from orbit. Jask exhaled for the first time in 30 seconds. His breath wasn't deep. It was stunted, held back by disbelief. "They're gone," he said, turning toward the main deck. Vest didn't answer. His focus rested on the Gravedigger interface. Now dimmed. The input stream suspended midstream. Cortrex's last pulse had completed its full route through the Zorith archival grid. Their memory of Earth had been overridden. Their command structure could not revisit what it now believed didn't exist. Alice traces? Vesk asked without lifting his gaze. Loop sealed, Jask confirmed. Black box trails, command logs, memory forks, all diverted. Any recon after this will hit blank identifiers. Even if they come back, they'll find nothing they understand. Vesk stepped to the core terminal. The switch he reached for wasn't marked. It was built for final use only. An analog disconnect embedded behind the power insulation seal. His hand locked around the breaker. "Deactivate Gravedigger," he said. "You sure?" "It did its work, now it dies before it becomes a weakness." The breaker snapped with a mechanical bite. A blue arc split through the panel as fallback circuits discharged their remaining energy. No alarm sounded. No confirmation appeared. The system simply stopped. Responding, outside, the satellites that had anchored the deception entered sleep states. Their signal emissions ceased. Drift patterns resumed. Unguided, organic, slow. No formation, no coherence, like rusted bones turning in slow circles above the planet. Across Earth's hidden infrastructure, a quiet retraction began. Underground conduits retracted their false radiation emitters. Buried shield domes realigned, reducing power intake to a residual trickle. Those below, engineers, tactical analysts, survival cadre, returned to what they had been before the siege, ghosts within their own soil. Yask stood at the viewport as the atmosphere slowly cleared. Cloud formations moved again, unscripted, imperfect. "Real. You think they'll come back?" he asked. "No," Vesk replied. "And if they do, they won't remember why they left." Below them, the cities remained dark. Surface entrances to the bunkers remained sealed. No signals leaked. No internal lights could be seen. The bunkers had been designed to hold generations. Not months, not years. Generations. In the command vault, 3 levels below, final record adjustments began. Civilian transport logs were wiped. Communication records erased. Infrastructure maps burned into isolated crystal matrices. Physically severed from all networks. The world hadn't just disappeared from the Combine's memory. It had been unwritten. Vesk keyed the last override command from the deck's central node. A trio of encrypted drives dislodged from the core. He gathered them without a word, storing them in the reinforced case behind the command seal. "Where do you want those archived?" Jask asked. "Nowhere near here." The command tower's elevation platform descended without sound. Vesk remained motionless as it lowered him into the protected archive chamber. No spotlights followed. The only glow came from status indicators marking vault containment as locked and stable. He placed the drive case into the deadlock vault. An artifact room with no uplinks, no systems, no power grids, just a thick-walled crypt beneath the last surface structure Earth would ever leave standing. The door sealed. Back on the surface, the atmosphere thickened with natural climate drag. No chemical dispersal units remained active. Storms would come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe not. But they would be real. For the first time in days, the air moved without manipulation. Yask sat down at the base of the now dark interface wall, his knees bent, palms resting loosely on the deck. He stared straight ahead, not at the stars, but at the empty view of what once held threat. "No message," he said quietly. Vesk stopped in the entryway. No record, no monument, not even a warning. Vesk answered without turning. "We gave them what they wanted," which was a dead planet. He walked away. Terran Vesk entered the command vault alone. The reinforced threshold sealed behind him, isolating the room from the last functioning chamber above. No monitors remained active. The interface wall had been stripped down to raw cables. Nothing flickered. No command seats, no tactical staff, just a terminal sunk into the floor, cooled by passive coils, buried in the silence of thick shielding. He crouched beside the case he'd sealed hours ago. 3 encrypted drives inside. Each one contained the operation's full execution. Every transmission sent, every Zorith protocol intercepted, every injected anomaly. No triumphant logs, no declarations, just evidence of a war that never happened. He slid the smallest drive from its slot, inserted it into the recessed cradle, and watched the archive system ignite with dry, static pulses. The screen unfolded in segments, processing the final closure directive. He entered the passcode manually. No voice input, no biometric scan, hands and numbers. The way secrets were kept, before trust was replaced by automation. The message field blinked open. One line waited. Final mission entry. Awaiting confirmation. He entered it without hesitation. We didn't fight. We buried ourselves. The screen pulsed once. Beneath it, another message appeared automatically. System generated, not written by any human. It had waited in the final layer of Gravedigger's command tree, buried behind every deception, every transmission, every kill simulation. The last line of the last defense Earth would ever deploy. Threat resolved through disappearance. Vesk withdrew the drive, turned off the cradle, and locked the archive chamber without delay. No ceremony, no reflection. He didn't believe in moments that tried to turn strategy into something noble. They had survived. That was all. That was everything. Above him, Spire Array Theta's remaining systems began shedding outer shielding panels. There was no need for concealment now. The Bastion would stay in orbit, stripped, drifting, unpowered, just another scar above a world no longer indexed in galactic traffic. Half a sector away, a drifting cargo vessel passed by without slowing. The captain didn't mark Earth on his maps. He didn't speak its name. His grandfather had flown military recon near this region once. When asked about Sol, he'd said only one thing. That's where we lost the truth. It was enough to turn entire ships off course. No chart included Sol now. Not because it was forbidden, but because it no longer appeared. The Combine archives had sealed the entries. Zorith Academy instructors skipped over the campaign. Officers were trained to ignore post-cycle sectors unless authorized. Sol didn't exist in directives, in coordinates, or even in common language. Junior analysts who came across references to Terra flagged them as system errors. In dark galactic ports, smugglers whispered other theories. That the Combine had tried to wipe a world and failed. That the AI turned on its own truth. That Earth's silence was not survival, but warning. No one argued aloud. Far out in a fringe station, a cartographer paused when a redacted sector blinked on his display. No readings. No light signature, no reason it should have activated. He'd tapped it. The system froze, then shut down. He never mentioned it again. Back on Earth, deep in the southern subterranean complexes, the population lived as they had before the first orbital breach. Children learned without knowing what had been avoided. Generations were instructed on concealment, not as emergency drills, but as doctrine. Culture moved forward through shadows. No one waited for war. They had already seen what war demanded to win. Yask remained posted at Relay 9, now inactive. He kept the surface sensors calibrated to detect only motion beyond orbit. When a civilian engineer asked why, he answered without blinking. Dead things don't watch, but myths do. Vesk returned to Ground Vault Alpha the same evening. His quarters hadn't changed. No celebration awaited, no recognition. The act that saved Earth couldn't be told. There were no medals for making the enemy forget you existed. He opened the secured cabinet beside his desk. Inside, folded and wrapped, was a weathered cloth with the old Earth insignia, retired, during the post-war disarmament treaties. A single line had been added beneath it, stitched by hand. We left nothing behind, except what they feared most. He left the cloth where it was. When he finally lay down that night, the overhead lights dimmed according to the vault's cycle. The room held no personal effects, no photographs, no letters. The future had been bought with erasure, not legacy. He would vanish alongside the records. But somewhere, deep inside a forgotten probe still drifting along the rim of the Orion Passage, a flagged Zorith warning remained, hard-coded. Do not re-enter Sol space. No reason, no access, no memory. The probe's data cache hadn't been deleted, It had been overridden by Cortrex, marked with internal contradictions that froze any AI trying to investigate. The warning remained because to remove it risked collapse. It circled empty space endlessly. An echo of a planet that died perfectly and completely, and yet never did. Terran Vesk closed his eyes. He didn't dream of survival. He dreamed of a moment no one remembered. Would you erase your name from history if it meant your people would live forever? Drop your answer in the comments and tell us what kind of strategy, weapon, or myth you'd want to see next in humanity's galactic playbook. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more thrilling stories.